Hello and welcome back to Art Therapy, the 12-week series in which Veronica and I work our way through the Artist's Way course. The Artist's Way was developed by Julia Cameron and is designed to heal our relationship with childlike, boundless creativity and to teach us to use our creativity to live a richer and freer life.
Oh my gosh, you are the birthday princess.
I am. We have been doing inner child work.
Inner child.
This was our third week of the course, and this week's discussion focused on themes of fun, whimsy, identity, and what it means to have a constantly moving and changing sense of self.
So I think we should start by explaining the week's themes because I think it'll really inform what's happening. So,
Absolutely.
The week's theme is recovering a sense of power, and the little blurb at the front is this week may find you dealing with unaccustomed bursts of energy and sharp peaks of anger, joy, and grief. You are coming into your power as the illusory whole of your previous accepted limits is shaken. You will be asked to I used to be able to read. I did a lot of inner child work and now I'm at my pre-literate stage. You will be asked to consciously experiment with spiritual open-mindedness. A lot of the tasks this week and a lot of the readings this week had us thinking about childhood, I suppose, imagining ourselves when we were less inhibited. And that's been, I think, for both of us, very interesting. Also, I feel like this was a week where a lot of things started to gel.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you did not catch the last one, we did kind of observe that in the kind of balance of our lives, romance and play were a little underrepresented. So a lot coming together this week. The theme is romance, hence candles, hence pink. We're filming this the day before Valentine's Day.
Yes, I know. Isn't that so funny? It's so perfectly timed. Is that a synchronicity? Who's to say?
I think so.
On the topic of inner child stuff and your birthday, you mentioned to me that you felt like these things were coinciding. It was bringing up a lot of your inner child work.
I think in the last episode, I was kind of talking to you about how I feel like I'm in a really serious era of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I've been dressing like Annie Hall. I have just not been in a princessy era. I've been in a woman era.
I also think you even specifically said you were trying to be angrier with people.
Yes, I was. And I still respect that hustle. But since I was a kid, because my birthday is on Valentine's Day, when it comes to my birthday, I remember this aspect of myself where I'm my patron saint is love hearts. I'm kitsch. It's all my birthday parties was as a child were themed with pink crepe paper hearts and heart-shaped cakes and just high femininity and high silliness and high sugariness. And it always surprises me that when it comes around here, because I suppose it's a religious feast day here, I don't really know, but they've decorated the city for St. Valentine's Day the way they do Christmas. There's hearts all over the city. It's reminded me of a very playful aspect of myself that I feel like I've really lost touch with. And I don't know, this is something we'll maybe dive into in this episode, but I have this mesh of confusing thoughts about on one level, I want to make serious work because I don't want to be unserious because I feel like if I'm less serious, I'll be more commercial. I don't want to betray my desire to be serious to be more sellable. But at the same time, I don't want to also lie about how silly I can be to be more serious. I think I was talking to Megan about this, my partner who's an artist, and she was kind of talking about it's you don't want to be capitalism's bitch, but you also don't want to be the patriarchal art institutions bitch. And it's hard. I'm either I want to be an influencer or I want to win a Nobel Prize. There's no in between. I can't physically imagine what the middle ground is.
Yeah.
And both of those are so dehumanizing in their own way, and they're so a little bit unlike the kind of the completely borderless way a child sees creativity in a way. I'm turning 25 tomorrow, which does feel like a very, I know,
it's monumental.
Younger than springtime am I. I don't know, it does feel like a nice one, and it does, when I feel like when I'm turning, like when it comes to a birthday, I often think about, like all the different ages I was, and you get kind of nostalgic. And I went on my YouTube channel and I was watching it, and I was watching these videos of myself at 18 in school, and I had just totally forgotten this character who was in them. My toxic trait is that I pathologize myself to death. So like if I can't just like music, I have to be like a song, it has to be like, why do I like that? Is it because of colonialism?
Yeah, what does this say? What does this really mean?
And again, this is like I'm hitting too many things here, because we'll also probably get into this, but I think growing up I thought I was like mentally unwell for a lot of my childhood. Like I just didn't understand that my feelings were normal, like, or that like any kind of way that I wasn't wrong. So like if I wanted to be with friends, then I was like clearly too clingy, and if I was just wanted to be in solitude, then I was a sociopath. It was these like big diagnostic, like from birth. And I really like myself now. I don't do that, but
so
at the time,
you really live in the extremes.
Yeah. Or I don't know if I do, but I used to really pathologize myself in the sense of like whatever I was doing, no matter. Now when I look back, I'm like, this all makes total sense. This is human behavior.
Right.
But at the time I was like, I feel like a lot of 14-year-old girls are like, everything they do, everything they think, everything they are, they're like, this is proof that I'm an alien monster. And I think I had a real big case of that. And so I'd kind of like written off my teenage self as someone who I've like thankfully outgrown. And thank God I'm serious now, and thank God I'm sane now, and I'm not that person who was such a people pleaser, and she was had no integrity and all these kind of things. And looking back this week, I kind of was I was kind of like, wow, I hate doing inner child work, because I think the point of inner child work is that you're supposed to like your younger self more than you like your current self. Like I think you're supposed to be like, oh, she's so innocent, she's so lovely, I would never want to be cruel to her.
Yeah, you're supposed to feel protective of her.
Exactly. And I feel like I tend to think of my younger self as someone who was much worse than I am now. So it's been an interesting week, because I feel like a lot of that has been coming together. And for the first time in ages, I really felt like dressing up today in a really like silly way. And I really felt like just like walking around the city and like journaling, and I've been kind of hustling a lot the last few weeks, like 5 to 9ing it in a lot of ways. And today I was just walking around like a Disney princess, and it was interesting, and it was a very unfamiliar feeling, but a very familiar as well.
This week, the course asked us to be aware of synchronicities. Cameron describes how a few weeks into what she calls creative recovery, people start to experience serendipitous moments where chances present themselves. It's as if, as we learn more to know what we need, those very things start appearing all around. Maybe because we're looking for them, because we're more highly attuned to those parts of life. In this chapter, she describes how often we turn away from moments of luck and serendipity or synchronicities out of fear or doubt.
I've kind of been taking a step away from, I used to be very into style and thrifting and things, and I've been taking a step away from that, because I was like, I'm rebranding as a serious person.
Right.
And like,
we're going minimalist now, we're going brooding.
We're going pantsuit, like that is,
But Annie Hall is amazing. She does have lots of fun.
Even at that, like I wasn't going to talk about dressing like Annie Hall. That wasn't my plan. Like in a video format or anything. And then I was feeling I was just remembering this really playful self. And then someone just sent me a job opportunity that's doing like cinematography work for a sustainable brand. Wow. And it was just so weird, because I just had the thought of like, maybe I'm ready to like dress up again, and maybe I'm feeling that desire, and like allow myself to embody a few, like not, be so strict about how serious I have to be or whatever. And then like literally that moment I got a text that was like, you should go for this job. They'll pay you in money and in clothes. And I was like,
oh my God.
And we'll check back in. But I was just like, this feels Julia Cameron core. So That's like almost the exact example she gave.
I love that term too. Like from now on, that's my new aesthetic. That's my new energy. Julia Cameron core.
Anyway, so tell me about some of your synchronicities, please.
Okay, yeah. So I had a bunch of little ones. Like for example, I keep seeing this book, Just Kids or something like that by Patti Smith.
Yes, I know it well.
Yeah. Yeah.
No words to love her.
Yeah, and so I've been really wanting to read that, and it keeps coming back to me. I don't know what is going to be in this book that I need to hear or experience, but it keeps coming back to me. And then I have this little like neighborhood free store where I live. So it's just a place where people, you can drop things there that you don't want anymore. You can take whatever you can take whatever you want and then leave whatever you don't want. And it's just part of our community. And I was walking past it and lots of people put books, and usually the books are in it like a bookshelf, they're not just like sitting out, so you kind of have to pick through them or like read the spines individually. For some reason, this specific book, out of all the hundreds of books that were there, was just sitting out right up front. And I was bringing something to the store to drop off. And so it was just sitting there waiting for me. And I had just been thinking about it. And there were like lots of little things that happened like that in terms of synchronicity this week. But it got me thinking about this one synchronicity that happened last August. So this was before I really transitioned into speaking more about my dance journey, and it was really on my mind, but I was still very much in, the style space and the fashion blogger space and all of that. And I got out of a burlesque dance class, and for some reason, I was already thinking of the song Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. And so I was thinking of it, it was kind of stuck in my head. And then right at that moment, a car drives past, blasting it at the top, like just as at the top volume they could possibly go. So I'm like, okay, that was kind of weird. Well, I just got out of dance. So now my mind is all fresh with like, choreography and all of that. And I was like, wow, it would really be so great to do some kind of choreography to that. And my mind was like instantly off in this creative flurry. So I go home, I check on YouTube, I'm like, Staying Alive by the Bee Gees choreography. And I discover this woman named Marissa Hart, who's also a burlesque heels dancer. Well, come to find, like, I instantly get obsessed with her. I'm totally like just binging all of her stuff. And a week later, her and Robin Anton, who is like the main person of the Pussycat Dolls, who, speaking of inner child work, probably isn't a great thing, but I grew up on the Pussycat Dolls, and yeah. It was like, probably shouldn't have been listening to them and idolizing them, but I did. That was my childhood. What can I say? So they were teaching a master class at my dance studio, like a week after I'm just falling in love with Marissa Hart, and like this whole thing is happening. So anyway, I take the master class, and I end up, it was like a Christina Aguilera song, which again, Christina Aguilera is one of my main icons. I love her so much. So all of this was coming together. Well, this is the video that I decided to post to TikTok. I wasn't really like sharing a lot on TikTok. And this sounds so silly to say, but it ended up getting over 1 million views. It was the first thing that's ever happened to me like that. Like, I have been trying to make videos on the internet for 10 plus years. No one has cared other than you. And like,
oh, but I care so much.
Like, you're the candlelight. You're holding the candle for everyone else. But but it was like, it just plunged me into this whole world of dance. And I'm very careful to not allow external validation like TikTok views and like vanity metrics and all of these things be my driving force. But when we look at that story holistically about all the little steps that it took for me to get there, and I mean, how many fashion videos have I shared? How many styling videos have I shared? It was the dance video, which felt like the truest expression of myself. That's finally, everyone was like, we love this. We want this. Yes. And it was like, okay. And so, yeah, it honestly kind of changed my whole world, and was the thing that allowed me to say, I think I actually want to share more of this dance journey. And it's also not lost on me that I kept telling myself, I feel like I need to follow my heart more. And then it was Marissa Hart's choreography to Staying Alive that totally changed my whole world. So it's like I followed my heart and I found the reason why I'm alive again, which is to dance.
That's amazing. I love that. It's the heart that gets me.
I love synchronicity. That has been a really fun aspect of this week.
You mentioned something to me in your like little list of takeaways, which was to do with the value of fun.
Yeah, so that's been something that's been really challenging to explore this week. Basically, I just found myself so resistant to having fun, and thinking of it like realistically, my relationship with fun right now is unhealthy. And I started thinking about it in terms of, I feel like I always bring things back to clothes. I just can't help myself. And we have been talking so much about style and clothing and all of that. And so there's that element of it. But also, as someone who didn't really grow up with a lot of money, it took me a long time to understand the difference between like the impulse buy, right? Like that crappy little thing that you see in the store and you're like, like you have that instant regret. Like, why did I buy that? That money could have been such better spent, and then like having that unhealthy, like, why do I even feel like I need that? Why am I so drawn to that? Why can't I save my money when I say I'm going to? Like, all of these things that I needed to work through. Now, I absolutely love investing. I love using money as a tool to invest in myself, invest in my creativity. So I realized that my relationship to fun was very similar, where I felt this guilt about spending time on anything, or even, to talk about money, even spending money on fun. Like, it's just this thing where I have this problem with frivolousness and the whimsical. And even though, again, to talk about our inner child work, like my inner child loves that. That's who I feel like I used to be. I am somewhere deep down. So I don't know where I turned into this, like, always have to be working, totally comfortable with working, totally uncomfortable with indulgence and joy, and like, what am I working for? So yeah, I'm just trying to shift that now in my mind and say, I can't pour from an empty cup. So in order for me to have something to give and to find my own sense of creativity, I've got to pour into that. I've got to go and have fun sometimes and let loose. But I want to put a pin in this idea of inspiration hunting. And so to me, it now needs to be linked with this idea of, not only is it just okay to go and have fun, and then that doesn't even need to be productive in any way, but if I'm feeling resistant and I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get off the couch. I don't want to go buy the bus ticket. I don't want to, me. Like, I'm having a bratty tantrum about going to have fun. Like, I can tell myself, you're inspiration hunting. you're out in the world. You're not going to get any inspiration from staying at home doing the same thing you're doing all the time. You've got to go out into the world and experience new things. So if only that, there's so much more to it that's like, you know, benefiting having fun, but if only that, that's been a great place for me to start.
I feel like I've watched a lot of and consumed in the last 5 years of my life, like a huge portion of my like input the last 5 years of my life have been kind of in this space of like mindset worth. But I think what's interesting is that often it's packaged as like self-care, love yourself, but it always has this end focusedness to it. So even if they are saying like love yourself, you know, take care of yourself, it when you really examine it, it often ends up being this idea that you will kind of gain something from doing this, and that thing you will gain, the unspoken part is often that it will be monetizable. But even if it isn't necessarily monetizable in traditional sense, it's still this idea of always gaining. It's still a very acquisitional relationship with life. And I do think that taking care of ourselves and having fun makes us ultimately better, happier people in every situation. But I'm kind of interested in this idea of like, what does it take for someone from such a consumerist kind of Western culture to have a relationship with an activity that is neither investment nor impulse buy, that is literally just like, here I am experiencing existence. Like, like what do we have to do to the Western mind to get there? And I think it takes more work than maybe we've given it credit for. Like maybe we simplify it. Maybe that's like, or maybe like we need to give ourselves more credit because that's more radical than we think it is.
I totally agree. And one thing I noticed in particular is that like I had the drive this week to do all of these things, such as making a collage, which I think I touched on last week in our last episode, or even like just walking down to the water because you know the rivers are very close here in Manhattan. It's easy to get to them. Just walking down to the water and not listening to anything, not doing anything, but just like looking at the water. Like that's just all I wanted to do this week. And yet I had this resistance that kept manifesting itself in terms of like procrastination or making myself earn it first. Like, well, I'll do all these productive things and then I'll reward myself by going to look at the water or make my collage. And then what happens is I don't have any more energy. It's like I'm going to do those things with a totally different energy where I don't really want to do it anymore. And now I'm coming up with all these other things as to why I shouldn't do it. And then it either doesn't happen or it happens at like 3 o'clock in the morning when I should be sleeping because I've like procrastinated on it all day. And now I'm like, fine, I'll make the collage. And I love that analogy or metaphor, whatever. But like the whole idea of like putting your big rocks in first. I'm sure you've heard of this, right? Yeah. And so like you know, you put in your big rocks and then you have your small rocks and then your little grains of sand. And it's like I always look at fun and indulgence and frivolousness as my little grains of sand. And I was writing in my journal this week that I want to look at some parts of my big rocks as the fun. Like it can't always be the little grains of sand or the water that I'm pouring in at the very last second.
I wanted to throw another spanner in the works, and I think it's very like in line with kind of just like the thought of like playfulness and also just the whole Valentine's aesthetic, which is a major theme. So I'm kind of interested in this like complete tangle of concepts I have in my head, and I'm going to try and untangle them here, and maybe you could help me work it all out.
I'd love to.
So when I think of like playfulness in art, when I think of childishness and, you know, hearts and sugary things and frivolousness, as you said, I get into a bit of a tangle because when I dress like this, for example, I'm aware that on one level, it's like fantastic, it's quirky, it's cute. And on another level, it's a little infantilizing. And we live in a culture that infantilizes women, that infantilizes our work, that infantilizes our aesthetics, and that encourages us subliminally to infantilize ourselves. It came up a lot this week. One of my answers to the questions where she gave you prompts for sentences, a lot of what came up was like, if I could make anything and, you know, I couldn't be judged and there was nothing holding me back. A lot of what came up was like, I would make things that were just frilly, that were just almost like dopily optimistic. But there's something that's holding me back from that. I get confused by it because I know that what I'm doing is something that female creatives tend to be cornered into, while people like on the more masculine end of the spectrum, but usually like cis men, have a different relationship with themselves that's less infantilizing, and a different relationship with work that's less infantilizing. And here's where this gets tricky. On one level, women are infantilizing, that's just bad. On another level, there's this whole theory about how male art looks like art. So because in the history of the world, male art was shown more than female art, and the same goes with like white art, you know, cis art, able-bodied art, etc. It looks more serious to us purely because it resembles what's in galleries, purely because the galleries are full of white men. It's not always that what I want to say, I'm infantilizing myself, or that I'm being cutesy because I don't feel like I have the right to be serious. Sometimes what I'm saying is serious, it just doesn't seem serious because I'm not a white man.
Yeah.
But sometimes it actually is less serious, maybe because society has taught me to be cuter. And I think like when I was thinking about how like deep this kind of tension is in me as a creative person and as just a person, and how I like express myself through style, the kind of woman I think I should be, I think about how I grew up around these really incredibly strong feminist women. But then I was also at the same time a teen during this like online. So I was getting two feminisms that were diametrically opposed to each other in some ways. On one level, I had these women who had like fought their whole lives to be taken seriously and are serious, you know, like there's nothing flowery about any of what they do. And I really respect that. And I think it's something that they had to fight hard in themselves and also in the world to get to that point. And I know that like if that's an idea that's maybe a little simplistic on one side, I was also getting this online feminism, which I think, because the internet isn't always a great space for nuance, can oversimplify its rejection of that idea. So it could be like, no, actually, like we should reclaim pink and we should reclaim hearts and we should reclaim all that stuff, which I do believe, but at the same time we have to be careful not to infantilize ourselves. We have to be careful to take ourselves seriously. So I published a thing recently and I was doing a panel about it last week, and in the thing I'm talking a lot about colonialism and the effects of colonialism. And it's just scarier for me to be on a Zoom talking about colonialism than it is for me to be on a Zoom talking about tiaras. But neither are less authentic. But I know that if I was to walk a path of least resistance, I'd choose to talk about tiaras all the time. But I also know that if I wanted to be taken seriously by the people on the colonialism Zoom and wanted to make sure that I was being taken seriously and that they believed what I was saying, I would be worried about them finding out that I also talk about tiaras.
Yeah. Okay. When you are saying serious work, what exactly, do you have an example of something that, because it sounds to me like you have really been exemplified that there is a specific type of like honest artist. And like, is it a voice? Is it a visual style? Is it the way of storytelling? Is it the stories that are told? Like, what exactly does that mean to you?
That is such a good question. I know this is like my main block and I cannot get to the bottom of it.
You can get to the bottom of it.
I'm just not currently at the bottom of it.
You're not there yet, but we are diving deep, girl. Well, I'll just say, like, when you're explaining this, my mind goes to like a Renaissance painting versus like the shit that's going on my jacket right now, where it's like it's very messy, it's childish, it's like it's kind of weird. And I know that people have lots of problems with like, is this real art or is that real art? And then there's this element of like, it's only real art if you can show this skill, like almost a photographic skill. But I think that real art can also be showing an emotion, which is a much more abstract thing. So I'm curious, like, how that translates into your mind, and this specific one of your mediums that you're talking about. Like, it sounds like when you're talking about it, it's, I would imagine, the specific stories that are being told and the way in which they're being told.
Yeah, it's the way they're being told, because when you use the visual art example, it becomes very clear in my head. I just want to know what I'm doing. It's not that I think that if I was doing one or the other, it would be better or I would be a better person. It's just that I'm aware that we're in this like world where I think I'm influenceable. So like I ingest the language of other people's, and when I say language, I don't mean like the way I'm writing maybe, but like the way I'm even editing a video. I think some content is made to sell things and is made to contribute to ideologies that I think
you don't
I
believe
want
in.
my larger body of work to be an argument against. I'm afraid of running into hypocrisy accidentally because I think I'm confused about what everything means in this current landscape, because it's like recent, you know, there isn't, Susan Sontag never told us what to do about it. I also think like what this artist way thing is really like making me realize is that like a big block that I have is the idea that you have to have like a cohesive creative identity. Like you have to choose your like vibe. So like, are you serious female artist or are you like cute creative girl? I know it's kind of bullshit and I know I'm holding myself back unnecessarily, but I hesitate to completely deny the trying to, I don't know, the questioning your desire to be to de-seriousify yourself sometimes. Like because I think I have like in my work
your voice for a
yeah
benefit of someone else.
Yeah, I think a lot about creative integrity, I guess.
Whose creative integrity? Your creative
Mine, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think what I'm realizing though, right, is that I have a false association in my head between like having integrity and being kind of boring.
Yeah.
And I think like what I like, I think in the past, the way that I personally have sometimes undermined myself and my own voice and what I have to say is that I've laughed while I said it, that I've smiled while I've said it, that I've been cute while I've said it to try and make it more digestible. And so I think in my mind, what integrity looks like is I'm frowning. And what I've been thinking about this week is like, yes, like cuteness has been a mechanism for me to like alter my own voice and to hide, but it could also be authentic. Like the form of my inauthenticity is not my inauthenticity. Like I can be cute and serious. The cuteness can be serious. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I think I'm having an epiphany.
And as you taught me last week, this is properly attributed to Walt Whitman now. We can contain multitudes. I have so many thoughts on this because I understand this so deeply. I really, really, really do. I think that this is something all creatives have struggled with at some point, and I think it's particularly exacerbated when you're making art online because there is that constant energy of you have to be clear. It needs to be clear who you are, because if it's not, people are not going to want to get on board with you. They can't trust you. They don't really get what it is that you're doing. And I will say that I believe in a very rudimentary way, all of the resistance that we're all feeling is fear. And that is just what it is. However, it is more complicated than that, because all of the things that you're feeling and unraveling and trying to figure out where they're coming from, all of that is so valid. But at the same time, it is good to know that, like, that's where the energy is coming from. And as you said, like, oh, I know I'm holding myself back from this for this thing that, like, it doesn't even matter. But like, it does matter, because it's part of your story. And there are so many voices going on. And that is the beauty of what it is that we're doing now, because it's uncomfortable and it's weird. And we're finally sitting with ourselves and like hearing what our own voices have to say. But like, so much of what you're like worrying about and these things that you're grappling with are other people's voices. And I'll say, just from like, jumping on these calls with you and watching your videos and seeing who you really are, like, you have such a light within you, and you have such a natural like comedic timing, and like just such a natural wit about you. And that is just light. Like, that's you. Now, that's my opinion. And what do I know? In my world, there's absolutely a way where there's a piece of your story that you're serious, and there's also a piece of your story that you're lighthearted and you're very unserious. And I think that's your superpower.
Thank you. That's so lovely. Yeah, another thing I think that came up this week when I was doing the questions was this like shame that I have that, and this might be a cultural thing, because I think you're less freaked out about this than I am, and like, Godspeed. God bless America. Like, you guys are great at this. I think I have this feeling that my work is too vain to be art. Like, and I don't know what that means, because like Frida Kahlo made art, obviously. No one's like Frida Kahlo was an influencer because she painted herself instead of painting like the fucking Taj Mahal or something. I think I've internalized a lot of this kind of like cynicism about maybe our generation. And it's so funny because it's such a double standard when I hear people say it about others. Like, I believe with my whole heart that people I'm watching who are speaking about themselves, I think it's so valuable. We're using our creativity to just completely express like the myriad forms of human life and experience. Nevertheless, I just feel like, well, don't call yourself a filmmaker, Ferga. You don't make films. You're just like you're just talking like it's your diary. Like, that's what, you know what I mean?
You know that I deal with this. Like, okay, we can sit here and argue over semantics, whether or not I'm a ballerina or a ballet dancer or a dancer, or we can just be like, she goes to ballet, so she's a ballerina. We can argue over semantics, like, you're not a real filmmaker. What does that even mean? When you get paid for it, when you get paid how much for it, what if you do or don't get paid for it, if you make a certain amount of body work, you make films. So to me, that's a filmmaker.
This is like last week, I feel like we were like coming with our wisdom, and this week I'm just like, here's my problems.
The only reason why I am speaking about this in this way is because like, you're 25, or you're going to be 25 tomorrow. I'm a little older than that, and I know that I went through that. Like, I was really struggling with this at this exact point in my life. So I don't know if it's like a brain chemistry thing, a self-actualization thing. And then I started to show my real self, like my authentic form of creativity, and people instantly loved it and also really freaking hated it. But I needed to experience that. I needed to feel what it felt like to be attacked for who I really am and overcome that, and also be, I guess in a weird way, praised for who I really was, because it's like, all of this is now real. It's not fake anymore. It's not this thing I'm just trying to be. It's who I really am, and I'm always going to have my center. So really, at the end of the day, the hatred and the compliments don't even matter, but at least all of it is honest now.
I love this. To a certain extent, honesty and creativity, like an honest creativity, is always going to reveal a sort of truth. and it's okay if the truth that is revealing is like a little ahead of how people see things. So if like selfhood, like as a cohesive vibe, is a
Yeah.
fiction in our society, which it may
Yeah.
be, like maybe we're just channels for different vibes at different times. It's like the weather, like maybe we're just not the same person all the time, and like
Dude,
that's okay.
totally.
Creating is all the different people, not categorizing it, showing up, being okay if people are like, this is chaotic. Last week you were giving me a Susan Sontag energy and now you're dancing around in a field. But like, I've really been like trying to like visualize my creative self like in an egoic
Yeah.
way, if that makes sense. Like the
Yeah.
ego of my artist. I was trying to make my artist a person who I could fill out a character reference sheet for. Maybe creativity is the way in which we kind of challenge our idea of selfhood. Like maybe our
Oh,
creative self is bigger than the concept of a self.
so good. Like this is creating my own epiphany too. I
Mm,
love what you said about being channels like the weather. And I
mm,
think that brought up the idea that it's like I deal with this. It sounds like this is something you're going through too. All of us creatives do. It's like we're judging the art that's coming to us. I don't think the creativity cares. We're just the channel. This thing came. If you want to put it out into the world, that's all
mm.
creativity is asking of you.
Do you feel like your ballerina self and your YouTube self are the same person?
That is such a good question. Yes and no. I think that my YouTube self, in terms of all of my creativity, is a very curated version. And it's something that
Mm,
I have to think through and I have to plan or I have to edit. It's not as authentic as the ballerina in me, the dancer in me that really is that channel. Like it's just all about pure expression. And
mm,
that's one of the only times I feel like when I'm on stage, whether that's singing or performing or dancing in any way, that almost feels like the truest form of meditation for me. I'm not thinking about anything else. It's like the only time where I am 105% myself in the present moment. And there's none of that. Is this wrong? Is this right? Is this, oh, how does she look? Oh, he looks so much better than me. Oh my gosh. Like, and sometimes it's very brief. And then I have to sort of like look at that from an outside perspective and be like, okay, what does all of this mean? And so it's like this constant, you know, it's this constant dance of
mm.
full self expression and full presence, and then editing that and analyzing that. And I don't think either one is really wrong. I think they're both just parts of who I am.
I think the thing that's hard about making YouTube videos fundamentally for me, there has to be something a little bit unself-conscious about creativity, I think. Like in
Right.
order to really express yourself and in order to be true to the whatever vision that's come into your head or to be true to whatever the project is, you have to a little bit not think that anyone's going to see you or like not care. You have to like lose all self-consciousness.
Right.
And there's something about like literally watching yourself, like literally editing your face and voice that's like not at all unself-conscious. Like it's the most self-conscious thing in the world. In many ways, creativity, being an artist, you have to become like Zen master at being beyond the ego. And having a YouTube channel is like a hellfire of ego. Like it's just, you can actually physically watch and imagine how you're going to come across and how people are going to perceive, like you're creating a character almost.
Yes.
Even if you're trying to be real, like if even if you literally lift the text from your diary and do a voiceover and you're just exposing these things that you really did write or think in these intimate moments, nevertheless you're watching it back and you can still see it as like how it would read.
Yeah, as a performance.
Yeah, and I'm kind of fascinated by that. But then I was also thinking a lot about the concept of performance not really being the same thing as a lie. I thought it was authenticity performance, but it's not. It's authenticity in authenticity, and then performance is up here. It's a triangulation.
Oh, so good. Because there are equal parts authenticity and inauthenticity within a performance, I would
Yeah.
say.
And it's like,
Ooh.
it's just like you have, like, performance is calculated, and all creativity, when you really get into it, like maybe the first or second time you do something when you have a beginner's innocence, there might be like a real lack of calculation. But ultimately, if you are becoming in any way skilled, you're going to understand the medium to an extent that you can calculate it. At which point,
Mm.
you're going to be able to understand how the performance works. So you have to perform, and you have to put the authenticity back into the performance on purpose.
Oh, that is so good. It makes me think of how, like, when I first started dancing before I was really
Mm-hmm.
trained, I would just dance, and you wouldn't really think about it. And then all of a sudden you start learning the technique behind all of that. And now you get into this phase of, is the technique right? And so I think it's this beautiful blend of pouring into the technique and also just that raw creative expression. But the thing is, like, the key is, I think, the technique portion, where
Mm.
it's like, now we're really over analyzing it and da, da, da. But when done right, when channeled correctly, it lends itself to the authentic.
Yeah, and I also think it's a bit of a curse of maybe our time. Like, when the internet and internet content first became a popular form of work and of entertainment, there was an illusion of total authenticity. We kind of have come to expect people to have panic attacks on camera. And we expect people, do you know what I mean? We expect,
Yeah.
and any sense of it being conceived is very taboo, like it's very criticized, and people sort of get very angry when they perceive like a social media personality maybe has misled them in any way. And like, I don't know, maybe it's more interesting to think about it not in terms of this like social media landscape, which is still so new, and to think about it in terms of like I think a lot about this writer Deborah Levy, who writes these memoirs that are like, they're about her life, but the main character doesn't have a name because it
Mm.
is and isn't her. It's kind of like she's taken life in such a way that she wants to make a cohesive piece of art about it, in such a way that it's making the point she wants to make.
Right,
Like she
right.
wanted to remind us constantly of the construction of it. And so the protagonist is her, has her life, has her stories, but does not have her name. And
Mm.
I'm kind of like fascinated by that in the world of YouTube. Just like, this is less a biography and more of like a personal essay in video.
So now, do you think that what she's doing is egotistical or self-centered?
I see your point. Touche, Monami.
No,
Thank you for being my therapist this time. I
Oh
promise
my,
next week I'll be more
no,
supportive.
this is great stuff. Like, it helps
Mm.
it helps me to hear the things that you're struggling with, because it makes me know, like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. I hope it helps you watching. I'm hopeful that it will. So it's
Yeah,
great.
but thank you so much for being here as always. Veronica, my therapist, and also the kids at home. The girlies in these tiaras at the back.
Oh yes, we're gonna be all the things all at once, and that's the beauty of humanity and being a fabulous woman. So,
Ole!
ole!
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Art Therapy. The course we are following is based on the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. If you would like to continue to follow us on this journey, you can find us every week for 12 weeks straight, alternating between Veronica's channel, Veronica Vicora, and my channel, The Prime of Life. You can also click here to gain access to the full playlists of episodes in order. Links to our channels, as well as our various other outlets, and to the Artist's Way book in both audio and PDF form, can be found in the description. Until next time, sending love.